podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
All right, I'm with Wayne for the midweek pod. Wayne, what have you been up to this week?
Been causing trouble, Ed. I've been wandering around. So I was saying it tongue-in-cheek, but I did get into a bit of trouble, actually. So,
Yeah.
You know what most people are like when they watch United lose. It happens quite often these days. Still not as often as, like, smaller clubs, and we've got to keep reminding ourselves of this. We're still immensely privileged that we're batting above the average of every club in England. Like the time when I dared to point out United have had financial difficulties because of the debt, and then some Bury fan came at me and said, well, at least your club's still in business. I'm like, yeah, but all things in context. Anyway, I'm getting, within 20 seconds, I'm already getting off stride. All right, let's pull it back. So when most people watch United and they get upset after they lose, they'll like do regular things. Like they might have a few drinks, they might kick the cat, they might go and do something completely different the next day to take the mind off it. I don't do that. I retreat into the history like normal, or the history of the club, and sort of try and indulge in something else that'll make me feel better. On Sunday morning, I decided to go into Manchester City territory, which is actually Northeast Manchester, which is Manchester United territory. Originally, we were the OGs in that area, so no matter what, they try and claim we were there a few years before they were, so I'm not having it. Anyway, so I decided what I was going to do is go on a pilgrimage of all the older grounds, and I've put some up on my socials. So people who are listening to this hopefully will have already seen it. If not, go and check on my socials on Insta and on Twitter. I've posted the sort of media of this. So I went to Bank Street, and Bank Street, the plaque is on a house, so you can see that. But it's pretty much accessible. It can be missed. You know, you might have to drive past it a couple of times, but it's there. You can get out, take a picture of it. The next one, I went to see North Road. Now, by the way, there are no stadiums, there's no pitches or anything like that. Bank Street is on a street across from, I think it's Velodrome. North Road, or what used to be North Road, is on the back of Fujitsu, I think.
Glamorous stuff.
Across from the police station, little industrial estate. Yeah, but you can walk onto it. It's like literally on the Fujitsu building, on the big road, on the big wall at the side, there's like a tiny little plaque. It's not an official plaque, but it's there nonetheless, and you can access it publicly. You can walk up there and get a picture and a little video of the surroundings, like I did, and I posted on Twitter. The other one, so those are the two grounds that everyone knows about, right? Bank Street and North Road. Most people know. If you dig into United history, you know of those two that were there before Old Trafford. The one that people don't really know a lot about is, and I don't know how to pronounce it, it's either Ceylon Street or Ceylon Street. Ceylon Street. So that was adjacent to the old sheds and the railway.
Right, yeah.
When they would finish their lunch break, they would go onto the field and play a game of football. This is before they got the finances to move to North Road. So it was literally just a playing field, and they went and played games against other workers and so on and so forth. So I went and took some pictures and videos there, because I don't think that's really a place that's common in United history, right? I don't think a lot of people know about that. So I took some pictures and video. And the first, as you drive into the estate, I think it's a Bellway estate now. They bulldozed it and put a load of not very nice houses on. There's a little overgrown area that's obviously been concreted and then it's grown through again. So it's not the original patch of grass, but it's the only greenery in the area. And then you turn into what would have probably been the pitch, and that's all houses now. And we went in, so I took some pictures and videos. And as we pulled into the estate, first of all, there was a man, like, he was early on Sunday morning, early-ish, 11. He was out in his pajamas walking his dogs.
I'm not surprised.
Very, very suspicious of what I was doing there, getting out of the car, taking pictures of. Well, In my normal demeanor, yes, obviously. Anyway, but in this particular circumstance, going up to a bush and taking a
Steady
picture
on.
of the bush, I should say, the bush. Oh my God. Edit that, please, if you can. Taking a picture of the bush, going around like that. And then he looked at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, muttering to myself quietly so I can get something for the video. And then I got back in and we drove around to the actual street and took a video. Get back in the car, and just as we're about to drive off, the guy comes out. In fact, the entire family come out to the front of their house, and they're like, "Are you taking a video? Are you taking pictures?" And I was like, "No, mate, no." Proper bricked it. I completely lied to him, and we drove off. So yeah, I did get into trouble. Almost, I would have been battered. I had no chance in a fight with that guy. And I was already feeling sorry for myself. I was like, please don't, Spurs battered us enough.
Should have just told him you're a writer and you're doing research for one of your books. It'd have been fine.
I'm not that brave. Yeah, I've been writing for 10 years. I'm still not brave enough to call myself a writer because it's so egotistical. I say, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a writer. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. If I said that to that guy.
Well, you do put words on a page, which is writing, and you're someone who does writing.
Yeah, so by that token, everyone in the world can do that. So I could have done that, but I feel like in that scenario, that would have been a red rag to a bull because it might have been suggesting he couldn't write because he looked like the kind of person who would prefer to punish my brains in than write anything ever again. And so we made a hasty exit, thankfully for, my few thousand followers on social media and the 200 people who've probably seen it. That video now exists on social media, even though I lied to his face and told him that it wouldn't.
If he had kicked your head in, the numbers you'd have got on those social media posts, they'd have been off the charts.
Yeah.
So think about that.
I mean, yeah. It is a shame that I didn't when you put it like that, because first of all, the sympathy. Second of all, I've been due a kicking. I think I've been due a kicking. So, you know what I mean? For it to come, it would have evened itself out. Yeah. That might be in another 3 or 4 years that I would have been due another one. So, yeah. But I didn't. So, unfortunately, the kicking is still due.
Very good.
But it is what it is. Anyway, those things, the pictures and the videos are on my socials. And it's nice because it is still nice, even though it is overgrown. The little area of
20
grass,
years ago, yeah.
To think that at one point there were Newton Heath players. So it was nice, and it made me forget about what happened against Spurs for a minute. You're not going to make me go over that, are you? Because I literally just forgot it. So
no, we did the debrief on that one. The heaping pile of dung that was that football match, yeah. So in interesting times at United. Any drama happened last week? We want to talk. We spent the last 2 pods talking about Mason Greenwood and all of that, but I suppose it's we've actually got the fallout now that United have confirmed that he won't be staying at the club, at least not this year. They've been typically non-committal about what exactly they mean. So the contract and he will presumably be going on loan somewhere. Where to be decided. There have been sort of links with Italy and Turkey, and the Saudi League came out and said, no, too toxic for us, which I was like, lads! In the same week that a report was published about, from Human Rights Watch, published about Saudi security forces massacring Yemeni refugees on the border. They were like, no, Mason Greenwood, too much for us. We can't take that one. Might damage our reputation. It's like modern football, fucking hell.
Yeah. Was it not Gerrard? This might have been like one of those like pretend quotes that gets amplified for no reason. Wasn't there a thing like Gerrard had said that there's no truth to that? And all the
that's right.
Rejoice because Gerrard's got morals. And like, what?
Yeah, so I mean, it's to be decided. I feel that United have botched every stage of this process, and difficult as it is, there is a kind of case study in here about how not to handle a crisis and how to make one of your own, which United managed to do. But somehow the next phase of it is to find the club, or his agent will, and kick the can down the road for another year and try and work out what happens in a year's time, I assume.
I don't think so with this. I think it's too serious. I know where you're coming from because of the nature of the way that everything's gone with this. I can understand what you mean. I think it's much too serious. I think that much was realised in that sort of 5 or 6 day period. We should say incredible journalism. I know you have already said it from Adam Crafton. He was unbelievable with this to force the issue and everything like that. There are some things, and I will say them, even though they might not really be popular and they might go against.
All opinions welcome.
No, you're probably going to kick me. This is where the kicking's going to come. It's going to come from yourself. Now you will get a fly, and the kicking will come, and it'll probably be somewhat warranted in general and for this. Okay, so because I've not commented, I've deliberately not commented apart from originally at the start where because everyone knew what their visceral reaction was to what happened at the time, and then there was a criminal investigation, and I've hosted podcasts, I run my own podcast, I've talked to different people on different platforms, and always been conscious of the fact that there has been that investigation. First of all, the criminal one, and then the internal one from United, and I'd never thought it was wise to really come out, apart from the original point of, obviously what he did was terrible. There's absolutely no defence for it, and I wouldn't have ever felt comfortable with him playing for United again. That much I would hope that anyone who would follow, not for what my opinion counts on it, that anyone who cared about what I thought about it would realise that from knowing who I am as a person anyway. It's a sensible and rational thing. The thing with United, and the way that it's gone with United, I do feel, you said there that it was a case study in how not to deal with something like this. But really, there aren't that many case studies like this because of the nature of the incident, and B, because of the profile of the way that first of all, the way that it's been put onto United's lap. Like the same with the takeover, and we'll probably see that at some point, where United, and we've talked about this before,
yeah.
United are often put into the perspective of being a political vehicle by the press in a way that other clubs aren't, right? So, and they've done. I'll try and be as brief with this. I don't want to turn it into a massive monologue for many reasons. I don't want to do that, and I know that I tend to do that with. But in this situation, I felt a lot of sympathy because a couple of weeks ago, when this started to get a bit of a snowball in the wrong direction, it was always the wrong direction, but you always felt like, even when there was something going on, you thought it's the club's internal investigation. Or at least I did. I thought, all right, I'll just wait until it concludes. Everybody was saying on the same thing, it's better dealt with sooner rather than later. But at the same time, I, as a supporter and someone completely independent to the process, still thought it will take as long as it's going to take. And as long as they arrive at the right decision, which we all agree was the right decision of him not playing for the club again and moving on, then I was quite comfortable with how long it took to get there, because it wasn't just a case of there was a criminal proceedings going on. There was the complication that came after that, which was the case was dropped or withdrawn, and B, the position that put Greenwood in, and his representatives and his family, as far as it came to negotiating with Manchester United, as you can see with some of the terminology, which I'll come to in a second. And the reason why I'm saying this in sympathetic terms is because it is unmetered territory. They hadn't gone there. Nobody had gone there. So, Richard Arnold was going in there on his own, and he's sort of dealing with it. It's very hot potato, very difficult. Yes, there was a very logical answer, but at the same time, there's a lot of sort of things to go through, and we weren't privy, as much as it seemed straightforward to us, we weren't privy to all of these things that were being said, obviously, from the Greenwood side, and they were dealing with this from February, right? So February to August, 6 months' time, and they're constantly saying there's such and such. Obviously, there's been some kind of protestation of innocence in there from Greenwood towards the club. So the club are kind of dealing with that as well. And they're saying, this evidence exists, blah, 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 blah. And we don't know all the ins and outs of that. We can only surmise that those kind of back and forths went on because of the nature of the statements and the way that they were put out. I felt a little bit of sympathy with when it did start to snowball recently, because I felt some of the reporting, not from Adam. Adam was unbelievable the whole way through, and there's nothing wrong with his integrity on this. Some of the other reporting
That's completely wrong.
One
yeah.
that said something
Yeah.
to do with the women are going to be consulted, and when the reason why it's been delayed,
Yes.
and that was unfair on United because that was never going to be the case. It was ridiculous to suggest that was the case.
Yeah.
And then Adam got hold of it and did what he did, and that held the club, or it put them into an accountable position very swiftly. I'm not sure. I'm still not, and I know people are going back and forth on this and saying, and most people, 95% of people would say United were undoubtedly trying to get him in a position to come back. I'm still, I don't know if I'm just saying this because I want to feel the best for the club, or I want to at least remain neutral on the decision, that I still feel like there was an element of explore every reasonable, not avenue, but like talk to everyone in the club at that point, make sure that everyone, all the major people who need to be consulted are consulted, and there can't be any doubt about that part of it because every story,
Sort of,
especially
yes,
Adam's
but yeah.
reporting, has certainly said that Richard Arnold went to all that extent to talk to all the different people and departments. But yes, okay, yeah, right, but I mean, those conversations happened without question, and he was talking about all the conceivable different things. Now, obviously, the unpalatable side of that is that one of the conceivable outcomes was that he returned and played for the club. Now, yes, okay, that puts into plan the idea that he would return, but I'm still not sure that was 100% the plan, although I know the other reporting now says there were the dates and everything that lined up for that. Fair enough, fine. And I'm not contesting that because Adam's reporting has been excellent. I'm just thinking, I don't, because that it wasn't made formally public. It wasn't announced publicly.
I don't know. I don't know how true that is, Wayne. I mean, it seems that there was a whistleblower club, pretty senior because they were privy to the plan. I don't know who Adam, but I've got some thoughts. And that's how it all got out. And effectively, the executive team were told first that this was their choice. Now, they were in any kind of crisis situation. They'd had 6 months to plan for different outcomes. And this is where we know there were potentially mooting ideas about loaning him out. I'm sure they explored the potential for sacking him. Once the criminal case had been dropped, that became harder. They probably thought about just paying up his contract. It's not that much, really, in the grand scheme of things, and just letting him go, which would have been the easy way out, non-prejudicial, we'll just buy, or bring him back fully. And it seems like the executive team and the football side of things were happy to bring him back fully, and they were trying to then enact that thing. Just a few thoughts on like this consultation piece. Like the two people they didn't consult, two groups. They may have talked to internal groups. Two groups they didn't consult were the fans, because that came right at the end, the fans forum meeting, after the 4th of August, and the women's support charities who they deemed hostile, according to Adam Crafton's reporting. And at no point did they talk to these two groups in the past 6 months. And I think that was a mistake. And the reason why I said it was a case study, because this outcome was really predictable. Like that there would be a backlash and they'd have to do the... and I was never... A few people in socials and a few people I know were saying, like if you listen to the socials, people that up in arms about it, and look what happened with Ronaldo, because there was a confessed rapist back at the club because he'd written it down and we knew all of that, but it wasn't as visceral. We didn't have the audio or the pictures, and I just thought you can't get away from that. We are visual, and audio is right in your ears, and it's just too visceral to not have a reaction. And the United's fans' reaction and the media reaction and politicians and charities getting involved was just like, as soon as that happened, I knew there'd be a U-turn, because of just how strong the reaction was against it. But I think that was predictable, and that's why I think it was such a bad mistake on the club's behalf to think that they could somehow get their way through it. It's like a plane, and the carrier comes along and says, the wind blew a bit, or there was a bird in the way, or it was unavoidable, the the weather was too bad or something like that. It's not what anyone wants to hear at that
I
point.
it's difficult to sort of correct decision was taken, and there was never any. I think you're completely right. What I would say is that maybe if you'd had David Gill in charge or Martin Edwards or someone before that who got a long experience of knowing even Ed Woodward, and I'm saying this in defence of Richard Arnold, and I realise that a lot of people will find that unpalatable, but hear me out on the way that I'm saying. He can still people can still be up in arms and demand his resignation. I'm trying to put a human face across here. He wouldn't have been aware. I don't even think that he would have been aware. I know he was around at the time of the Super League. He wouldn't have been aware of the kind of pressure that Woodward was under to sort of deal with that, and then he had to resign. Like, for example, he wouldn't have been aware of the pressure or the kind of profile of pressure when Cantona kicked the fan and the pressure that put on the club, or the Sky B takeover and that got aborted, or the pressure at the time of the takeover and that in 2005 and how that all went across. So to say, all right, we anticipate a little bit of backlash and it might get political and there might be hostilities. Yeah, they're definitely 100% the wrong way to put those kind of things. But I think that's kind of like the naivety of not understanding, like you said, how visceral that backlash is going to be. Because once, we all understand it because we're fans, and we, like you said, right from the start, when he was even suggested, he's going to come back, I understood because I've been around the block supporting the club, that the backlash would be too great and it would take on. And I actually wasn't expecting to be as big as quickly. I thought maybe that would rumble for 2 or 3 weeks, but it got a lot of steam very quickly, and then it was rightly shut down. What I would say is, again, just to close on this, the point I'm making with Arnold is that imagine from his position, all right, it seems logical that the conversations he's having are 50% that logical side of everyone sort of saying, well, you might have got some people within the club who knew him and saying, well, we've got a responsibility with him. Then the other 50% saying, probably larger than that, 80% at that point, that 80, 90% saying we're not comfortable for the obvious reasons. And then from the other side of the gate, you've got the Greenwood entourage who are kind of saying, well, he's innocent and he just wants to play for the club again, and you've got a responsibility to us. And those are the kind of conversations that he's in, like that constant demanding of them being innocent. And I'm not saying that I agree with anything in terms of the statements and things like that. I'm not saying that I agree with the length of time that it took. I'm just saying from his human position.
I get it, but I do think it is, to paraphrase Gianluca Vialli, putting a learner driver in charge of a Ferrari, and it was the same. With Ed Woodward as well, learning on the job, and I do think that's part of the mistake here. It might well be, and I suspect there's a significant amount of truth to this, that like key decisions are actually taken out of the executive's hands because the owners, and Joel Glazer in particular, is quite hands-on. And that is very unusual in normal business. You don't normally get that with a listed company where the executive and the board don't have decision-making powers. And Richard Arnold, chief executive, he has significant executive power in a normal company and could probably make this decision. And in a normal company where you're talking about a quote-unquote asset that is to pay off a contract which is a few fractions of 1% of the total value of the club, it wouldn't even be a second thought. I mean, for employees, it wouldn't be a second thought. It would be goodbye straight away. Here it was slightly different because, in theory, Greenwood has a lot of value in the market. In reality, he doesn't, of course, and there's no way United are getting a large fee for him right now. So I can understand why it was difficult. Probably in the background, you've got the Glazers who are penny pinching enough that they say yes or no to equipment in the gym or repairing the swimming pool, let alone potentially cancelling the contract of in good times, £100 million player. So I kind of understand the difficult position he's in. That said, they made some catastrophic mistakes here. The length of time it took for an internal investigation, which, as we understand it, and I'm not privy to it, so I'm just reading between the lines, did not include talking to the complainant, victim or alleged victim. Did involve talking to her mother and then Greenwood himself. And it seems to be an asymmetric investigation in which the majority of the evidence has come from Greenwood. And we haven't seen, they won't have seen the police interview. That will not have been released. So there's that. There may have been more of that video or audio that was posted and that we haven't seen. And they kind of suggested it in the statement that there's kind of evidence that we're not going to release to the public. And I think the most catastrophic mistake, those are operational things, length of time, how they dealt with the evidence, who they actually spoke to in gathering and making this decision, the pressures from the Glazer family and so on. The biggest one was to make the assumption that we would trust them. We fans would trust them. He's saying, hey, just believe us, that there's evidence here that like what you've seen and heard with your own eyes is not the truth, the full truth. And context, the full context, I think, as they said in the statement, and there's something else out there. You just have to trust us and believe us that this is true, and that we're not just being an awful, cynical football club, just out to maximise the value of our asset or the results on the pitch, and that there's something more there. And what about the last 18 years says that we should trust them? There's just absolutely nothing, and I think that was the biggest, most catastrophic mistake. And it's one of the reasons why not talking to the fans until after, effectively, the decision had been made was so bad. Because if they'd gone in March and said, hey, fans, what do you think? You're an important part of this community. Yeah. I think they'd have got a very honest reaction at that point. And I suspect that they'd have behaved very differently and they wouldn't have brought all this on themselves. So, anyway, that's my view. A lot of this is conjecture, I realise, because we're not party to this. We're not on the inside. Yeah. We don't really know the full truth. Yeah, even Adam Crafton, who's an amazing scoop there, who's got a whistleblower inside the club, he won't have the full picture because he's just got what the executives were trying to do. Anyway, what a mess.
Let me just my last thought on it is just to clarify all this sort of like preceding ramble as well, is that the way that I'm phrasing all that is to demonstrate some kind of sympathy for everyone being involved in the collateral fallout of this, because everyone, because Richard Arnold, regardless of people's opinions on how he handled it, was not the perpetrator. He wasn't the culprit. He was given a very difficult thing to deal with, and everyone, quite rightly, is going to have their opinion on that. The staff who worked with him growing up, and people are criticising, it's the environment which raised him and all sorts of that sort of stuff is not good for United. And it's not fair on those people because the culprit is one person and everyone knows that those values really don't represent anything to do with the football club. They don't represent really anything that we as fans associate with the club. And anyone in a right mind who considered the evidence that we all saw would not want him to play for the football club again, and we would quite happy if his name wasn't mentioned alongside the club again. And not bigger people have made this about women and daughters and young girls, and it's not. It's about everyone, really. It is principally about them because about women and daughters and girls and things like that, because we don't want an environment where they don't feel safe. First of all, in football, but in general, considering people's attitudes toward that behaviour, considering these brought out the worst of some people, but it's mostly, like I said, to every single person to know that that's not acceptable, and it's really not. And the reason why I'm clarifying that, and I know that I said at the top that everyone should hopefully expect that from me anyway, that I would feel that way, is that I sometimes feel that when, especially here, because I know that it's quite a polarizing thing, and everyone on this podcast, we've all got really strong opinions of how we feel with things. Try and put across like a more human, not saying that no one else is human. I'm trying to think from every perspective.
There was a human involved in this, and lots of humans involved. But we were talking about Richard Arnold, the lead. He seems like a fairly normal, down-to-earth guy. I've worked with a lot of executives over the years. I've never met Richard Arnold. I don't know him. I'd have had a few thoughts on advising him, for sure. But he seems to he went down the pub, he met some people, some fans, and he talked to them. He seems like he's actually fairly in touch, and not all executives at large companies are. In fact, quite a lot aren't. And so I do realise the pressure on him will have been immense, and especially over the past week or so, built up to a point where the U-turn had to happen. So, no, I think that's fair. when you remove that part, though, and you say, hey, it's about executive decision making, I think he's probably, whatever the context of why it happened like this, he's probably demonstrated that he couldn't make that decision. And that's why, I put out on Twitter, I think he should resign. It's the only right thing to do. And that's not him. Maybe he's a really sound bloke and I'd love having a pint with him. Maybe he's a feminist. Maybe he's got the same political values as me, you, whoever. All right, who knows? Don't know him at all. So it's not a commentary on that. I just think as a decision-making process and person, it wasn't. He found himself to be valuable. Is that a word? The opposite of infallible. Yeah. Talking's hard, folks.
Valuable things.
Amazing we've got through 600 of these things. All right. Anyway, we may find out more over this. We've got 7 days of the transfer window, 8 days, I think, and then Turkey and Saudi Arabia go on for a bit longer than that. So if they're, and I don't know where else might be possible, but we'll get some clarity. Awesome. The other thing we had this week was a report by Custis in The Sun that the Qataris have won the bidding and that it will be closed out by mid-October. I'm going to say right off the bat, I think that is total, massive, steaming pile of bullshit and completely wrong. We'll see if I'm wrong, but I think this was very conveniently timed. May just be complete coincidence. And also, we've seen this report loads and loads and loads of times over the last 6 months. So, but what were your thoughts on that?
I don't know if to generate
I know
a distractive spirit around something positive. The aliens come to Neil Custis. I don't think they would arrive. I'm not sure if that's a leak or if he's just wrongly informed. It did make me laugh because obviously he comes out and he publishes a report, and then Cave on Sky, he has to go and have his say. And he's just, I felt like when I watched it, I only watched the clip's Twitter feed, that it was something that they'd done 3 months earlier, because he said something like, oh, they won't go above 5 billion and they're concerned the Glazers won't sell it all. And there was nothing for whatever you think the nonsense of Neil Custis, and I'm not here to discourage anyone from thinking Neil Custis writes something that isn't nonsense. But there was a new element to the narrative of the story to say, well, there could be an announcement next month and it could be concluded. They expect to conclude it by October. Now, it could be completely fanciful, but at least it's a new direction to that part of the story, whereas Cave just goes on Sky and he says exactly the same thing that he's been saying for 4 or 5 months. Well, if you've got an ear in the Qatari camp and Sheikh Jassim's telling you something, why isn't that something aligning or contrasting with what Custis has said? So I'm not. At least Custis has gone out there, and if he said the wrong thing, he's gone where the sun have boldly gone many times before. But for Sky to sort of gone like, oh, do you know, like, not even to reference the fact that acknowledge that the sun exists and roll the better for that. But he's reacting off the sun's report. So why not at least acknowledge the activity within that report to give us an update? Tell us it's crap if that's what you think. And he does. I mean, I'm with you. No news is no news, and the sun is as good as no news. So I don't think we are any closer knowing. So nothing to report. As much as they want to think that there is something to report, I just don't think there is.
It was interesting that the outlet was The Sun and a football journalist rather than. I mean, the Qatari camp have gone to the Reuters and the FT quite a bit, and Bloomberg, and the Ineos came on to the Times repeatedly with their views on it. Everyone's leaking all over the place. Rain have been to a whole bunch of different publications trying to create some jeopardy in the bidding process, which doesn't exist. You've got a value investor and then a state bid in which they're sick of having their pants pulled down repeatedly and restricting the price as a result. You're right, in a sense there's no news here. I just thought it made such a big splash everywhere, and people were commenting. It moved the stock price about 2%, but that's just speculation. The market doesn't believe it, because if you really believed it was done and dusted at between $32 and $35 per share, the share price should be up close to that, because you're like, well, they're going to close out by October, I will get a huge lift on like buying at 21 as it was before this report and getting 32. You're going to make a huge amount of money. The market doesn't believe it. Hasn't moved that much. There was a bit of short-term speculation and it will gradually slide back to around 2021 as a share price over the next few weeks as we all realise that it hasn't been wrapped up and done and dusted. I'm beginning to suspect, and this is just a hunch, no information whatsoever, so, it's my chip paper.
They don't even do it. You've been gone from the UK for so long, Ed, and that's not even a thing. I'm so disappointed with you. That's like you've ventured into the territory when the Sun might have once been reliable in the pre-Hillsborough days, and they go, oh, okay, well, they got one story right every 3 weeks, and you kind of gamble on that ratio with your chip paper theory.
Yeah, well, no, it's totally throwaway what I'm saying, but to the point where they've said they're obviously the family doesn't leak in this whole process. The only party that doesn't leak is the family, so they're obviously very tight. They've set a price at which they're prepared to sell, and that price has not been met. So I'd be surprised if we get a sale this year. And given everything else that's happening, the club's reputation's a bit in the toilet as well. So whether they want to ride this out and wait another year, we'll see. But I kind of suspect that's going to happen now, and that we won't get a sale.
Yeah, and the reaction at this moment in time, on the back of the way things have been. I know that there's a planned protest for Saturday. I guess we're going to talk about that, but the climate at the moment, they would be quite ill-considered to announce that they weren't going to sell, because there are stages of withdrawal and anger as supporters, and there's a step after apathy, and I think United fans are bubbling at the moment, and they were placated a little bit by what happened on Monday. But I don't think, like you say, it's a very hostile time. It was, to be in no uncertain terms about it, it was a very, very dark week for the club. This has been very desperately dark. The days from sort of Wednesday to Friday to Monday were very, very difficult to be a United fan. I'm talking historically difficult. In my opinion, we're talking like sort of at least top 10. I don't want to think about where it goes in the rest, in that terminology, in the order there, but definitely top 10. It was very desperately dark, and it seemed very grim. So to be following that by quoting more of it, I can't see that. But yeah, I think there is an element of me that since we got back into the Champions League, and since that sort of alleviated a little bit of financial burden in the transfer market, and there was a little bit more movement, and now we're seeing no movement, it does indicate that a bit. I'm surprised that I'm not surprised that you called it out because you're on the ball with stuff like that. I'm surprised that no other journalists have sort of followed that track a little bit and sort of, talked about it a little bit more, because I guess that would have been the thing that might have pushed the needle.
Yeah.
To inflate a little bit more pressure, but it's just not happened, and it'll probably take until another difficult season.
Yeah, well, it's going to be great when they take the dividends out, isn't it? Yeah, that'll be. Well, they will have done it actually, because it probably would have happened in June, and we'll get the financial results in. I don't know probably the end of the quarter, so maybe in a couple of weeks' time. I forget the timing of it. Okay, let's take over. Then we got Forest on Saturday, 3:00 on a Saturday.
Yeah.
What madness is this? I think it's 3:00 on a Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, is it not the first of 4 in a row of those? We've got a few in a row, like Palace and Brentford, and I'm pretty sure Palace and Brentford are Saturday 3:00. Forest, I think they're a little bit more settled than. They were so routine, the wins over them last season. I can't see that being the case this time around, partly because United are in a little bit of a bind, but secondly because Forest look a little bit more stable. And that's some famous last words.
Well, they didn't bring 20 players in this summer, did they? So
exactly. So it looks like, and they look like sensible signings, that they're building on something. But you always see that with teams in the second season, that they look like they're building towards something. And then they'll have they might have a drop off at some point in like November, and then it's very difficult to claw that back. And they are very much the kind of team that could be like that. But they finished the season quite strongly, and I feel like there's an element of that. again, whenever he says stuff like this about a team that's been promoted or a smaller team in the league, it sounds terribly condescending. But that, like, there's an element of free hit about it. But like, Wolves came to Old Trafford and it was like there was a free hit, and they played so well, and maybe even Spurs a little bit because they were playing at home. It's the first game without Kane, a couple of days after losing him, and it's like, oh, nobody knows quite what to expect, and they went out and put on a performance. We didn't know what to expect. We were like, oh, how did Spurs play without Kane? And that's how they play. They play actually quite well without him. And we're in that kind of scenario again where people aren't really going to be expecting Forest to do anything, and all the expectations on United. And there's a lot of expectation on that squad at the moment and on the team for them to turn up and put in a performance.
Now kick on.
And I don't. It's difficult to look at them because they don't look like they're handling that. Because there's definitely an expectation from the back end of last season that we're now saying, all right, well, you've won a trophy, you definitely kicked on from the previous season. Now you've got to do something better. And for a lot of that, it looks like it's going to be a difficult step for those players to take. And no, that's understandable, fair enough. But it's not easy to watch. Do you know what I mean? It's very difficult for them to watch, and it's difficult, and I know Mason Mount's going to be missing, and that might be a bit of a blessing for him because it's been difficult to watch him to sort of bed into that environment because people probably quite rightly expect spectacular things of him, and there's been teething problems in how that's going to settle down. We don't really know yet. It looks like it's a conflicting position with Bruno. Hopefully that gets settled, but it's probably a good thing that he's missing from the game because he's a very typical example of how difficult it is for those players to settle down at the moment. Even like Rashford and Shaw, who've been there for a long time, the pressure on them to sort of now get out of this funk where they play well for one season and poorly for another. They've started this season under that weight of like everyone is looking at, like there are a lot of critics, even though they played well last season, there are still the critics saying about those players, oh, are they going to come good or are they going to have another stinker?
I mean, I agree. Rashford, Shaw and Mount, three you picked out there, both had really bad games and two bad games. And Rashford, he doesn't look comfortable in that central position. Every time I said on this pod in years past that I thought maybe he could turn into a number 9, I was clearly wrong. It just doesn't feel natural to him. He's just, well, the stats say it. It's so clear. He's twice as dangerous when he's coming off the left. He likes the ball in front of him, likes to attack players, and so that's obviously being a bit challenging for him without Martial, without Højlund, who might well make the bench in this game. Let's hope we see a little bit of him. That would be nice. And sure, you're right. He's made a mistake, didn't he? Got out of position for, I think, the first Spurs goal. And I may be remembering that wrong. But it didn't look like his old self. He needs Malacia back to put pressure on him, which is never but to need someone to put pressure on you. And Mounts, the difficulty there is Ten Hag's brought him in to do a job he has really never done in his career, which is play an 8. And even if it's like a double 8 system with Bruno, they've clearly been getting in each other's zone, as you mentioned, and it's been a kind of slightly awkward. And I really, 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 really hope, and I've said this a couple of times on the pod, that Ten Hag's solution to that is not to play Mount at 10 and Bruno wide. I really hope that's not the case because I think that's crap. I hope it's Mount learns how to play 8 as it is. For this weekend, either Eriksen comes back in or maybe he can turn to Scott McTominay. I guess he's barely, I don't know if he's seen a minute of football so far. Has he? I forget.
Yeah, he came on for the back end of the Wolves game. Yeah. He was centre forward. So
good stuff. Yes. So I mean, I'm guessing that Mount's injury means McTominay's not going to get sold because we need the numbers because Kobe Mainu is unfit as well, and so we're just desperate. And Fred has been sold, so really short in midfield again.
Yeah, I would want Eriksen to start. I think there has been settlement in United's midfield when he's come on, to whatever degree that's been. It's been not great to better than not great, which is, I think, probably the best way to the most positive way to describe United's season so far. So when he's come on, he has made a positive difference. So it would make sense to start him because United need more importantly than anything, they need to get rid of him in the performance back. And Eriksen, he's quite good at doing that. Certainly against Forest at home, that should be if you can't. I know that there's a question mark, and I think you're dead right. That you've said a few times about starting in most games now in the Premier League, especially now we've got Mount. But if you can't start against Forest at home, with all due respect, without wanting to be condescending, should you really be at Manchester United? And that should be the base level for any player in the squad anyway. So that's why I thought like maybe this is a good. Oh, it was a.
He needs the minutes too.
Yeah, but I think a few players do, and I wish that. Not I wish. I don't think that strongly about it, but I feel like maybe the Premier League or United are missing out on a bit of a trick. Because there's obviously going to be a fixture backlog at some point, and fixtures will get postponed. There's been 2 midweeks here that they could have easily used to sort of get the players play games. And the Forest one, I feel like if that was in midweek, it's like as if it was Wednesday just gone, then if Ten Hag had made 4 or 5 changes, people would have just said it's just usual rotation because the games are coming round a bit quicker and you need to get the players minutes. Whereas if he makes those changes, if he drops Anthony on Saturday and puts Palestri in, which he could well do, and Anthony couldn't have any complaints. If he drops Garnacho and puts someone else in, if he drops Shaw and puts it looks like he's dropping players rather than giving other players minutes. And I know that sounds like I'm griping at the fixture calendar for criticism that Ten Hag's going to get. I just think it's not really helped United in this scenario. It would have probably helped us if we'd had a couple of games.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And part of it was pre-season. It was kind of slightly weird, wasn't it? Pre-season had all those games, but players weren't really getting more than 60 minutes ever, and it feels like they're a little undercooked as a result. And I think that's why they had the game against Everton last week and the game against Burnley just on Tuesday this week, just to try and get some players some minutes, especially around the fringes of the squad. Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why the beginning of the season hasn't been very good. They're just not quite as sharp as they could be, given how pre-season went. But yeah, it's a really important game. Like we would definitely be in crisis territory if United always one game away from a crisis on the pitch, aren't they? But if Forest were to win at Old Trafford, there would be it'd be a problem. But they played quite well against Sheffield United, Forest, and I do think you're right. They're more settled now, and they've got a good manager.
They weren't bad against Arsenal. Langer did very well for the goal.
Right.
So they weren't terrible there. So if they can go to Arsenal and give them a game, then they can certainly do that at Old Trafford.
They haven't got the world's greatest keeper, Dean Henderson, because they didn't do a deal with United for Dean, who may or may not be staying. It's unclear at this moment. Bought Matt Turner from Arsenal instead. Who's a decent keeper? Not a brilliant keeper. He's a decent keeper. But hey, I guess they didn't want to pony up the money for Dean Henderson, world's greatest keeper.
World record fee.
Record fee for, yes. I'll say it again, the world's greatest keeper in his own mind.
It is a bit of a difficult one for United with a few of those players now, because we're 7 days, at the time of this recording, 7 days from the end of the window. And, you said McTominay, there's Maguire.
Yeah.
And obviously Henderson.
Van der
Martial
Beek.
as well.
Martial.
Yeah, so you're talking like five or six senior players who could easily move on, and a lot of money to be sort of moved around in. I mean, not tons, but 5 or 6 players of that nature, you could be talking around 70 to 80 million pounds, which United could really do within the transfer market. And the quicker that they do receive that in, the better equipped they are to not go and get someone that they will be scrabbling around for on deadline day, like
Marouane Fellaini.
Like the players that we've... I suppose we could put this out to the followers or the listeners of the pod, what is Fellaini up to? He's got to still be playing. I can't imagine that he's retired just yet.
Is he still in China? I had no idea.
We'll find out. Yeah. Someone will tell us. I'm sure of that. But and the thing is, was it fan power last season? Was it Arnautovic or something? Whether we were in for Arnautovic and Rabiot, and it was kind of like, no, don't get them. The fans kicked off, and then it was Anthony and Casemiro instead. It was like, okay.
We didn't want Arnautovic because he's a racist, and Rabiot because his mum's a nutter, or just a hard negotiator, I should say. Yeah.
Amrabat's all right though. I like Amrabat. There are concerns about his.
I think he's a bit
quality ceiling.
Yeah, I think he's a bit lightweight, but he looks nice on the ball. He's a good passer. He's a good passer of the ball. I just wonder whether he's actually an upgrade on Fred. I feel like in the last couple of pods, I've praised Fred more than I had in the previous 5 years. I'm suddenly missing him.
Yeah. It's you. Yeah, I think that's it. Like, he started quite well, hasn't he? Like, over there.
Yeah.
He scored a good goal the other day. And it's kind of like, we're watching YouTube Fred again.
Yeah.
And now you're watching YouTube Fred. And you can see what YouTube Fred can do when, 90-minute Fred.
Magnificent volley with his right foot. It was ruled out, by the way, for, I think, an offside, which was ridiculous.
Was it? Oh, well, I didn't. Yeah, there you go.
But it was a cracker.
Paid attention to the full clip.
Zidane against Leverkusen in the Champions League final, that was. Cracking stuff. Fred.
Well, that's why he was doing that, so not that level stuff at Shakhtar. Yeah. That was the kind of play that we thought we were getting, and now he's free from the shackles of Old Trafford to go and do that again. So, yeah, as long as he's as good as Fred, whoever we bring in, then we've taken one step to the side, and that's all we can ask for.
All right, very good. What a fun conversation. Mason Greenwood take over. Your trip around the darker reaches of Manchester, nearly getting your head kicked in for taking video local. You can be careful there, Wayne. That's investigative journalism. That is checking out a piece of United history.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in as safe a bubble as it can be, driving around New and Heath. And ending, obviously, like started with a threat of getting my head kicked in, and ending with one because of the violence that you might bestow upon me.
Never.
You're not a violent man, Ed. I know that you're not.
I am not.
I know you wouldn't do that.
Before we go, my conversation with Simon Lloyd, whose new book, United with Dad, is just out. It's a really interesting and fascinating read into both United's history and his relationship with his dad. Difficult read at times, but here's my conversation with Simon, and we'll catch you after the weekend's 4-0 victory against Forest. This week I'm chatting to Simon Lloyd, whose new book, United with Dad, was out recently. Simon, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a real pleasure. I managed to get through this book in one sitting.
That's good, I think.
Yeah, I just powered through it on my phone.
Wow.
It's a really interesting book. It's partly an homage to your dad, partly modern history of United as seen through his eyes, and partly about the relationship between father and son and what football means, I guess. I mean, What was the inspiration for writing the book?
You've summed it up quite nicely for a start. A couple of things, really. One, as we'll go into more detail later, my dad was obviously terminally ill for quite a long time, really. And I became a father myself in 2017, and I became acutely aware as time went on that my son, Ethan, who's now 6, wouldn't really have a lot of time with his granddad. So I had it in the back of my mind, I wanted to do something that would kind of tell him a little bit about his granddad when he got older and old enough to ask questions, really. And the logical way of doing that was to do something about United, because it was the thing that our relationship, me and my dad, that is, our relationship was built upon, really, was that connection to United and going to the games. I don't think I really thought I was going to write a book at any point, but I was going to write something, and not necessarily something that was going to go on sale either. It was going to be something just for him. But my dad passed away when Ethan was 2.5, just before, probably quite close to his 3rd birthday, actually. About a month after that, I went back into work. I was working for Joe Media at the time, and first day back, and I just boshed out an article, 1,000 words, and it was basically called United with Dad, and it was just basically me trying to process what had happened, but in word form. And luckily my editor at the time kind of allowed me to do that, and he had a really good response. So when that had settled down a bit, that was when the seed first started to grow, really, that I could fuse the two ideas together and get something that was a bit more permanent that could maybe help other people as well.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it sounded, well, at least from the book, like that was a very difficult end to his life, both for him personally and for you as a family. The descent into sort of almost not recognising the family because of the dementia and the cancer that took his body as well. But also a time for you to reflect back on your relationship with him and going to football, which obviously the book spans a really long time period from the 50s when he first started going to 2019, 1819, when he passed away. And it's sort of told through both the prism of important games and seasons and moments and memory, and also your sort of ongoing relationship with your dad at the time. How did you put that together? I mean, it's an interesting way of sort of constructing the narrative.
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult decision, that, because as you've just said, it spans a long time. I think that for this to really appeal to a lot of United fans and to formulate an accurate picture of my dad, it had to include like his early experiences as well of going, because he first saw United play in the mid-50s before Munich, and was absolutely obsessed from moment one. And as you'll know if you've read the book, my dad grew up in a pub. My grandparents had a pub just literally right next to the railway line to Manchester and Liverpool, about 10 miles out of Manchester. There was a train station at the top of the pub, which meant that my dad had access to Old Trafford quite easily on a match day, which was perfect for him. And I think that those early experiences shaped a lot of who he was as a person and what mattered to him in his life. And I felt like I had to get that in. Now, the difficulty was trying to fuse all that together with what I was trying to say about the other end of his life. But so in the end, I settled on alternate timelines, really. So I had one which was my dad at the start of his life and gradually getting older. And then that was kind of interspersed with the last 2 years of his life and the experiences we had, because a lot of his decline, especially with those last 2 years, I kind of charted at Old Trafford, going to the game with him, because that was the only real quality time we really got together was going. You know what it's like when you get a bit older and you've got kids yourself, you don't really have a lot of time to just nip in and see them. So those 2-3 hours that I got Saturday, Sunday afternoon, whenever it was, that was my quality time with dad, and when I started to notice things, really. So that was the challenge, really. But as time went on, it kind of changed a bit when he stopped going to the games and was no longer able to, and the dementia started to really like kind of become more severe, more pronounced. That was the United connection there, kind of took on a bit of a different meaning.
Yeah, there's a few sort of really nice passages where you describe the scene, which will be very familiar to people who spend a lot of time at Old Trafford. Familiar faces, you're sitting around, the sweary lads who have a go at the referee, even though you're sitting on tier 2 of the North Stand, so Alex Ferguson stand.
That's right.
Yeah, not quite up in the gods, but far enough up that the referee couldn't actually hear
the other parts of the ground either. But you always have the characters, don't you, who are quite like target the referees.
Yeah, and how does this sort of relate to your early experiences of going as well? Because there's a nice kind of bookend to the story of him going with his dad the first time, you going with your dad for the first time, and you taking and you almost like kind of walking him out of the ground the last time he went to Old Trafford as well. So there's some parallel lines there.
Yeah, I mean, those early experiences, I think, like I know it sounds really cliche, and I think I say that in the book itself, but if you end up going regularly, you always, no matter what happens, you always remember that first sight of the pitch, don't you? And my dad, I think, had waited for a long time to have an excuse to go regularly, because he, as the book says, he went as a young lad and right up until like the 70s, really, when he had a brief hiatus where he couldn't go because family life and other things got in the way, which sometimes is the way with life, isn't it? But towards the 90s, when United were just starting to come into that really amazing period they had, I was at the age where I was just taking interest in football. My dad was waiting. He was obviously trying to encourage me and drip feed me like programs that he brought back to the game. He was dying for me to start going. And obviously it took me to my first game, and I talk about this in the introduction, where my dad, we just had this lovely moment, and it stayed with me for years. At the times, I probably didn't understand it, but looking back, I do. We got back to the car, and it was a November game against Ipswich Town, and it was midweek, it was a school night. I was absolutely knackered, and it was 0-0. It was an awful game, and there was snow in the air, really, really cold, and we parked on some like scrap of wasteland somewhere in the middle of Trafford Park. I'm not exactly sure where it is now, because when you first go there, it's like a labyrinth, isn't it?
It is. Kind of place you pay a couple of lads £5 to make sure your car's still got wheels on afterwards. Yeah,
and I just remember my dad opening the car door and saying, "Is that it now? Are we going to go next week?" And the week after that, are we in now? And my dad had just grinned. And as I say, at the time, I don't think he understood it, but I think looking back now, that was him thinking, "Yes, I've got him." And he had that excuse to go back regularly. And those early memories, a lot of it at that time, because you're getting used to it, kind of blends into one. So you don't have any specific memories of what the game was, apart from one or two exceptions. But yeah, it obviously went a long way to building the relationship me and my dad had over the years that followed, and certainly for what happened towards the end too.
All the anecdotes in the book about his early life of going to football, and he played football semi-pro level as well, and that's kind of weaved throughout. How did you go about pulling those together? Are those tales he told over the years that you remembered? Were you thinking about like recording this? Because it's like the book is part memoir as well, really.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I probably should have said this in the first question you asked me before, but I think from what I said to you earlier on about how I'd had the idea about wanting to put things together for Ethan when he was old, my son, so that he had something to look back on. I was making notes. There's actually a book I've got on my shelf behind me in Warrington Town when he used to play for them, because that's who he played for and that was his hometown club, so he was very proud to play for them. So there's little bits of information I could get through that. And a lot of the games that are referenced in it and his early memories were just built upon stories he told me in the car on the way to games. Because I think like probably a good 60-70% of the conversations we must have had as adults were about United, and about his memories and about various things that happened. So it did get to a point where I did jot things down as well, because I thought one day I would like to put this in some kind of like tangible book that I can pass on to my kids one day when they're a bit older. So that kind of helped a lot when it came to putting it into a book form as well.
You got some favourite memories of games that you visited with your dad?
Yeah, obviously the first game. I think I referenced this in the book as well. One of my favourite ones is my dad, like, he was very set in his ways about things, and he used to get really hurt by people leaving early. Yeah. Which, you know, anyone who's been to Old Trafford on a match day, I'm not judging those that do leave early.
It is a nightmare getting out, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But my dad hated that. He was absolutely furious. And the idea of spending so much money, and like, even if we were getting battered, I can remember like sitting there when United were getting convincingly beaten at times, and my dad was like, no, I paid so much money for this ticket, we're not going anywhere. And like, I don't know why, but the Juventus semi in the Champions League in 99, when obviously Conte had scored for them, and a fella, probably about 10 minutes to go, decides to get up and go, obviously beat the traffic. My dad was probably a bit miffed as well, because obviously the European Cup meant so much to him. Yeah. A lot of that generation of supporters, really. The fact that United looked like they were probably going to be going out at that particular moment, I think it all came together and he started having a bit of a go at this bloke. And that wasn't really my dad's character, but because this guy was leaving early, he decided to just vent his anger at him. So moments like that stand out. And that's kind of like the theme of the book, really. It's not necessarily like the big goals. It's not necessarily like the games that everyone else remembers. It's little moments that happen at inconsequential games that, you know, don't really mean anything to anyone else now. Like I've just mentioned there, like 0-0 against Ipswich in November 1993. No one remembers that, but to me, that game's really special because of obviously the associations that are tied to it.
Yeah. Do you think you're going to pass it down from granddad to dad to, or your granddad to your dad to you, to your kids now?
I hope so. I mean, I talk in the book as well about my granddad, my dad's dad. The irony is he wasn't massively into his football at all. He was more a cricket fan. And to him going to Old Trafford, was watching Lancashire play or one of the tests, and he strangely, like around the mid-60s, suddenly started getting into going to United with my dad. And my dad at the time couldn't really understand it. He thought it was a bit strange, and he just put it down to George Best, because he got so used to so many people that were normally there at Old Trafford on a match day going to watch Best that he just assumed his dad just wanted to go and say he'd seen it himself. And years later, when my granddad got quite poorly with Parkinson's disease, my nan, his mum, basically told my dad that the reason he did that is because you'd left home by then, and he realised the only time he got to spend with you would be by going to the football, which was quite a nice theme to tie in with obviously what I was talking about and the situation I find myself in now, where my Ethan's on about going to games with me now. It's a difficult one because it's a fine balance when a lot of dads will relate to this, that you don't want to impose your interests on them, do you? You don't want to push them into it and force it. Because Ethan, like, he knows his own mind, even though he's 6.5. And I feel like if I did it too much, he'd say, right, I support Liverpool or City. And he'd probably then be put on eBay. But it's that sort of thing, isn't it? Where there's a balance to it. You don't want to put too much pressure on them. But he is taking an interest now, and we had some lovely moments towards the end of last season, actually. Got to a couple of the games, the Wolves game, and it was one where it was quite delicately poised until the last few minutes. They were winning 1-0, and Garnacho broke away. And he'd been to other games before then and seen goals. But this one was the first time I was like really aware of him watching like the build up, and he could see the player getting nearer, and he could see that the chance was coming. And moments like that where we're like celebrating together were really nice, and something that I thought, yeah, he's getting there now. Almost a bit similar to what I was talking about with my dad before that. I've got him moment where he's actually taking an interest, and it's crystallising into something.
So I've got 3, 18, 10 and 6. And I've found it quite a struggle getting them into football, and I totally resonates this idea of not pushing it on them too strongly. The 10-year-old is into games. He has shown almost no interest in football at all. So it's you don't pull out some kind of weapon and shoot someone in football. So that's really difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah, not yet.
You know,
but the younger one is.
If Saudi Arabia have the way, it might go that way.
Well, exactly. There may just be a moment that sparks the interest. And the youngest one is now doing, as they call it here, soccer. So he's showing some interest. I think I may be able to drag him to something. Obviously, we now being away from England, getting to Old Trafford will be more difficult. But and honestly, the Sounders are terrible. So. It may not be that, but I have taken him down to the supporters club. Well, he's been with me actually, the younger one. So, but that kind of connection really does matter, doesn't it? It's something, as you say, something to an excuse to have a conversation, a reason to spend time with people.
Yeah, and so much the match day, like you just touched on there. It's not about the actual 90 minutes of football.
Yeah,
it's about the journey there and the things you talk about on the way, and just spending time in each other's company, and that's what. Obviously, like my dad's thing towards the end of his life, before things got too much, was that he really wanted to go to an end with Ethan, and he never quite got there. And I'd like to think that it'd be lovely if Ethan develops anything like the kind of passion I've got for it, just because my dad would have loved that. And even though he can't be there to witness it, I think it's something very powerful about being able to go to a place and say, oh, that's where your granddad used to stand when he was 10. So that'd be nice, but yeah, it's not going too hard with it, isn't it? It's just making sure he forms that passion naturally.
And the other thing I think that really comes out in the book is the connections, and everyone will resonate with this. This is not just about the football and the results. In fact, I think as you get older, which you reference as well, it's almost the results start to become secondary to the people that you've made connections with and the experience of going on the match day, and especially now in times when it's all about money and finances and big business and state ownership and whether the centre forward is a rapist or not, and like all these things that we didn't want to have to talk about.
Yeah, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's still about the connections between the fans.
Absolutely, and that I talked about the piece that I'd written initially that kind of like was part of the reason I ended up following it with the book, and the feedback I got to that, and the early feedback I've had for the book already, which has been like quite overwhelming. Really, it's been a lot of people referencing that relationship, whether it's with the dad or whether it's with anyone else that goes to a game with them, because it is that. And I think like, as you do get older, it does become less about the winning and the losing. Obviously, it's a lot better and a lot more enjoyable if you're winning, but it's not really what it's about. It's not really why you go, I think, the older you get. But then we would say that after 10 years of mediocrity. Yeah, so. Maybe that's just me being in denial.
There are definitely passages that I really resonated with, where you talk about the kind of stomach churning, nervous anxiousness, which through my teens and my 20s and 30s was like a real sense, like to the point where you're not really sure whether you're actually enjoying the football because it feels so horrible. And then as I've got older, that's a bit less. And it's not because I care less. It's just, I don't know, I have more perspective around it. And also, I have less expectations over the last 10 years about actually doing the winning. Yeah. But there's a chapter in your book, or a piece in your book about the night in Paris as well. And that's right in the middle of your dad's sort of final stages of illness as well. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's it's an interesting time for you to reflect on things. Yeah, well, that whole time was right in the thick of when things were just about at the worst, really. My dad he went on to live for another 7 or 8 months after that, but the dementia, and a lot of people who know people in the family who've lived with dementia will know that sometimes it can manifest itself in the person who's living with it being quite aggressive. And
that was kind of what was going on at that time. So the home leg, the Paris Saint-Germain game, my dad was in hospital at that time in Warrington and was quite poorly. And I'd gone to visit him on the day of the home leg, which is where they lost 2-0. And football then was, like it is for a lot of people, it was a form of escapism. It was just a way of shutting out what was going on with my dad. I'd gone to see him. The curtain, he was on a ward there, but the curtain was kind of pulled around him. I didn't quite know what was going on. And went in there and he just basically just came at me with this volley of abuse, which just was not my dad, was swearing and everything, which is, anyone who knew him, he was a deputy head teacher for a while, and he was very like straight down the line and didn't really want to swear or use bad language and stuff, but he was really, really angry and directed a lot of that at me. So I had to go in the end, and basically I went to the game that night, but my association of that game and that whole time was that. And then the away leg came about a couple of weeks later, and initially I planned on going, but things were kind of like spiraling a bit with my dad, and for whatever reason I didn't think it was apt for me to leave the country while my dad was like that. So I settled in to watch it, and those that I'm sure not many people listening to this will have forgotten it, but obviously United had lost the first leg 2-0 at home when there was absolutely no chance of them passing through, and then gradually things started to go the way. They took a lead, it went to 1-1, and they scored again, and then there was this ridiculous situation that even though they were playing actual children at the end of it, because they were so depleted with injuries and suspension, they ended up scoring the goal for Rashford. What had happened with me is I got so consumed with the game, I'd completely forgotten everything. Like the outside world didn't matter. I was just in my living room, and I think I referenced this in the book, but I was basically rolling around on the floor. I was so nervous, and it meant so much for those last few minutes, just waiting for the penalties to be taken, and completely lost myself. So the goal went in, Rashford scored, and obviously went berserk, got told off by my wife for nearly waking up a little lad who was in the bedroom above. And then full time went, and instinctively after that, I reached for my phone, because the thing I always did when I'd watched the game away from my dad, or a game on TV, or if it'd been an away game, whatever, I would ring him as soon as you got out of the ground, just to have a quick chat, just to quickly debrief on the game and just enjoy that moment with him. And I was so swept away by what had happened, I'd forgotten that obviously I wasn't able to do that. My dad was in a hospital ward and didn't really know who I was anymore. So moments like that are quite difficult. It still happens every now and then. You get that nanosecond where you think after a game, oh my God, and obviously it's nearly 4 years now, and I don't think that'll ever go away. And speaking to friends who've been in similar situations, I think it's something that
because you want the experience to be shared
as well,
and especially with the people that mean most.
Yeah.
What do you think he would think of current modern United then?
I don't think my dad despised like the commercial element of it. He accepted it was part of what the club had become, and I think he understood that what the club had become was because of that as well. He didn't like it. It was something that he never felt comfortable with. He always felt like it was a million miles away from what he'd grown up with, which obviously it was. Obviously the Glazer stuff, he was like anyone, was never really on board with that. And I just think that the last kind of conversations we had where he was like in a position to hold like meaningful conversations about it, he was just very distraught about it, really, that he could never understand, like a lot of us can't understand, how it was ever sanctioned that a group of people could come along and buy a club in the way they did without really putting anything in themselves and basically cream money out like they had done. And it wasn't illegal what they did, but that's what he could never completely fathom, and how that was ever allowed. So I think he found that difficult. And as I say, like it's strange really, because my dad, he used to go on a lot of holidays to Europe and stuff when we were kids. He used to have a caravan and we'd drive into the continent, and it'd blow his mind that he'd go to these places in Italy and stuff, along these campsites, and there'd be kids there wearing United shirts and they didn't speak English or anything. That used to blow his mind, that ends. And he understood that came as part of this being this big brand, if you like, but I think it always like felt strange to him. And as I say, the way it's become the last few years, I remember I don't think I put this in the book, but I probably should have done. I remember like Weird on a match day, they had one of the little stalls that they set up outside, one of the sponsors, I think it was the official wine partner. And my dad had gone into this thing, and Quinta Fortune, bless him, was there. And he was like speaking to fans, and my dad had a big chat with him. I remember my dad chewing his ear off about basically the state of the club and this corporate stuff. And Quinta Fortune has just been really polite and trying to kind of diffuse the the conversation and stuff. But my dad hated it.
I know. I mean,
dread to think what he'd think of it all now. But
I mean, we're of an age.
for him, in some
I'm
respects,
guessing
he's
you're
not there to see
a
it.
few years younger than me, but we're of an age where we probably first started going just as the end of the sort of old era of football. So I started going in the 80s. And then really started going a lot in the early 90s. That was kind of the time where I was going to games when my mum really didn't want me to, that kind of thing. And that was just at the beginning of the era of commercialisation. Yeah. But commercialisation then was they founded a mega store and you could go in and buy stuff on a match day. And then there were 2 mega stores at Old Trafford and that kind of thing. And yeah.
There was that really big one on the back, wasn't there? I remember that.
And now it's moved on where it's global sponsorships and media and state ownership and private equity groups and this kind of whole range of stuff that just feels completely alien and feels like it shouldn't be part of the game, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no escaping it now. And I mean, I guess the only way of escaping it is to get yourself a state ownership, which obviously is not the better alternative, if you ask me. But it's the nature of it now. I don't see it really changing. But it was just so far away from the innocence of the first few days, where it was just basically a team made up of predominantly local lads, and obviously the likes of Duncan in that as well. And
is that
so far away from that.
Passages in the book where you talk about how your dad used to wait for Duncan Edwards and some of the other players at a bus stop, and he'd go hours before the game to have a few moments of walking along with the great man. You wouldn't see that today, really, not unless it was organised by sponsors. So
yeah, I've got to say it would be in association with Aon or whatever it was, wouldn't it? Or whatever the official noodle partner is these days. But yeah, it's just so far away from that. And obviously, the idea that any member of the first team could set foot outside the ground on a match day without being escorted in now is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? But it was so commonplace then, from what I can gather. And there was a group of kids that used to follow them along when they used to walk into the ground, but it was always respectful enough that they didn't really hassle them too much. Which was literally, as I say in the book, it was my dad just following around, looking at them all starstruck, but not really quite having the nerve to ask them any questions.
Excellent. Well, the book's out now. I know you had some distribution issues at first, but how's it doing with the sales?
It's doing very well, yeah. I've been pleasantly surprised because obviously it's my first time doing this. I've never written a book before. So it was, last time I checked, the best-selling United book on Amazon, which you'll never sing that.
Try and start that one up in the Stretford end.
So it's been pleasantly surprising, but my motive for doing it were just, like I say, it wasn't really about making money or anything. It was just about having something for the kids when they're a bit older. But, it's intriguing to see how people are receiving it now. Quite overwhelming, the feedback I'm getting early on with it, really, which has been nice because it's not just like my nan telling me it's good, it's other people too, which is quite pleasing.
Yeah, well, I think you will resonate with a lot of people, not just because they went with their dads, but just the sense of community and belonging and what that means. And obviously it's a very personal story for you as well, clearly, and people will recognise that. So, yeah. No, congrats. It's a good read. As I said, 220 pages in one sitting, which was a lot of fun. Fun's not the right word. I mean, it's okay. It's a good read, but it's obviously difficult because it's a personal story for you. So you do feel like you're sort of spying on that last few years of his life in a way. But congratulations on the book. It's got a fantastic cover as well by Stan Chow. Different style to normal. I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah, he was brilliant with that, by the way. He put in loads of effort into it. He's obviously everyone's familiar with his work now, but he was fantastic with that. Especially given the very vague pitch I gave to him of what I wanted to. He was wonderful with it. So, yeah, good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining, Simon. United with Dad, out now. All good bookstores, Amazon, and so on. Go grab a copy, and thanks for joining the pod.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.